Hey there, wellness family. Thank you for clicking on today's video, which is how to stop the fear of rejection. So if you're new to my channel, my name is Peter Gordon and I'm a graduate student working towards what will be an eventual doctorate in clinical psychology. I also happen to be a life and a health and wellness coach, and I make videos on mental health, fitness, wellness, and everything I hope can help you to lead your most profound life. And while you're here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you're notified each week when I post a new video. Also be sure to like this video, comment on it, and all that good stuff. Now let's get into the heart of today's topic. But before I get into today's topic, you might notice that I'm not in my usual spot in Rock Creek Park here in DC, surrounded by nature. Well, unfortunately, what happened last weekend was that I injured my left leg. In fact, I ruptured my left Achilles tendon. And so, I was playing soccer, and it's the nature of physical activity, right? There is always a potential for risk with any exercises that you do, even just walking down the road. Well, unfortunately, again, as I mentioned, I ruptured my left Achilles tendon, and I'll be meeting with the orthopedic surgeon tomorrow to determine if I'll need surgery or there is a natural way to heal it. So I might take you guys on that journey, but not sure yet. But again, it's just the nature of life. Things happen and you adjust to them as they arise, right? So with that being said, let's now get into the heart of today's topic. So today I'm going to be talking about how to stop the fear of rejection. But before we get into that, what exactly is the fear of rejection? Well, the fear of rejection in the most simplistic way is to say that you have a fear that if you ask someone for something, they are going to reject you. And that rejection that you think will come prevents you from asking for this favor or whatever it is. It could be perhaps, for example, maybe you are a pregnant woman on a subway standing and you want to ask a stranger for a seat. Well, you are convinced that the stranger will tell you no. Perhaps you are someone that admires someone from afar and would like to ask them out on a date, but you're convinced they'll say no, so that causes this fear. The rejection that you think you're going to get creates this fear, right? So in a simplistic way, that's what the fear of rejection is. Now, this fear of rejection can be a very debilitating thing for a lot of people. It can prevent advancement in careers, education, asking for simple help, right? Because in our minds, we are convinced that the person will reject us. And what this can trigger is depression, anxiety, and a host of mental health issues. So it's not as simple as just saying, oh, there's a fear of rejection. Again, for many of us, it can be quite debilitating. So what causes this fear of rejection? Well, I'll be the first to tell you that prior to going into the world of psychotherapy, I used to believe that it was more of a confidence issue, in that the person with a high level of confidence doesn't fear rejection, while the person with a low level of confidence or low self-esteem actually has the fear of rejection. That's what I thought for the longest while prior to going into the world of psychotherapy. Well, it turns out that the fear of rejection is not one centered around confidence or low self-esteem. It's really more of a cognitive issue. In essence, it's the way how we actually think about ourselves. Let me explain. So in a recent podcast, one of my favorite podcasts that I love listening to on NPR, it's called The Hidden Brain. The podcast was titled The Influence You Have, Why We Fail to See Our Power Over Others. And I'll put a link in the description to that particular podcast. Well, it turns out in that podcast, what they highlighted, which I found was fascinating, was that our fear of rejection is really more of a cognitive function. In fact, it's tied into something called egocentric bias. So what exactly is egocentric bias, and what does it have to do with the fear of rejection? Well, for starters, egocentric bias is the heavy reliance on one's own perspective, or perhaps we have a high opinion of ourselves that's really not based in actual facts, right? That is egocentric bias. So according to this podcast that I listened to, egocentric bias is one of the primary drivers of the fear of rejection. What they were saying, which I thought was fascinating, right, was that when we approach someone and when we fear the rejection, what we're saying from an egocentric bias standpoint is that that person is going to reject me. We already made it up in our mind that the individual is going to reject me, so why bother ask? And that is in fact where the fear of rejection comes from. Again, as I mentioned in a few examples, perhaps you're a pregnant woman on a train, you sit there or you're standing there and you want to ask somebody if they could give you a seat. You already assume they're going to tell you no because these people already have their heads down. And in reality, what could be going on is those individuals have their heads down, they're in their own world, right? But the egocentric bias makes you think they're not going to help me, they're not going to give me a seat. Could be the same thing if you're asking for someone to help you in your career. You're going to assume, you're assuming that they're not going to help you already, and that is simply based on your own egocentric bias. And again, as I mentioned, what the person being interviewed said was a good percentage of the time, when the individual simply asked, they actually got their request granted, even if they had this fear of rejection, right? So the point I want to make here is this: the fear of rejection is not based on the notion that you lack courage or low self-esteem. It's really potentially, based on the research here, it's really tied into your own egocentric bias. So how does one then overcome the egocentric bias so that they can kind of bring down their fear of rejection? I think it's a human nature. I do think we're always going to have some fear of rejection. That's normal. But how do we prevent it from becoming debilitating? How do we bring down our own egocentric bias? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. The first thing is you need to develop self-awareness. If you don't realize that the fear of rejection stems from your own bias, right? Then you won't be able to get over that fear of rejection. So the first things first is recognizing the own bias within yourself, that you're already determining that an individual is not going to do something, right? So being self-aware allows you to live in the moment. Allowing you to live in the moment, makes you realize you can't control the future and you can't control people. So all you can control is how you feel, right? So that's number one. Become self-aware. When you become self-aware, it allows you to manage your own egocentric bias. The second super simple thing you can do is to perhaps talk to a friend. If you feel like, okay, I want to ask this person for help, but you have a fear in doing it. If you have a good friend, reach out to them. Say, hey, is this in my head? Good friends will be able to help you realize very quickly it's in your head, man. Just ask the damn question. I know that happens to me a lot personally, where I'll get into my head and say they're going to reject me. And I have my little circle and I reach out to them and they will tell me, man, it's in your head. Go ahead and ask for the help. And 9 times out of 10, every single time I would ask, I would either get the help or perhaps I didn't. And then guess what? At least I know, then I move on. So have your little circle, talk to them, reach out to them, and see if they can give you good advice. And 9 times out of 10, they will. So the last thing you can do is seek professional help in cases where the fear of rejection is debilitating. The self-awareness thing did not work, or your friends really can't help you. Then in those cases, I would say definitely seek professional help. Work with a psychologist, a therapist, a psychiatrist. They can help you cognitively restructure how you think and how you process your own thoughts. Again, that is only in cases if it's really serious and it's becoming debilitating. That's when I would encourage professional help. So hopefully this very short video makes sense to you, and I hope you can use it to stomp out the fear of rejection, because I believe that you deserve to live a good life, and one way to live a good life is to have people in your corner that will help you. But the only way people will help you is if you don't have the fear of asking for help. You don't have the fear of rejection. Again, hope this all makes sense, and as always, family, stay well. But hey, before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, which is my face right there. Also, feel free to check out some of my other videos by clicking any one of these 2 little boxes right here. Stay well, family.